The C&P exam. It's the final hurdle. It feels like a courtroom drama, a pop quiz on your own pain, and the single most terrifying hour standing between you and the benefits you earned. Most veterans walk into that room thinking they just need to describe their symptoms. That is a massive mistake. The C&P examiner isn't just listening to what hurts. They are assessing how it limits you, when it started, and why you deserve compensation for it. They are trying to fit your lived experience into a rigid, bureaucratic rating schedule. If you use the wrong language, if you focus on the wrong details, or if you fail to answer the deeper, unspoken questions, your claim will be denied or severely underrated. You need to be prepared for the 6 specific critical questions that underpin every successful claim. Miss one, and the whole structure collapses. Let's dive into exactly what the VA is looking for and how you must frame your answers to secure the rating you deserve. The first critical question, the one that sets the stage for everything else, is deceptively simple. Describe a typical bad day. This is where most veterans fail spectacularly. They walk in and describe an average day. They say, well, most days I can get around the house, I can drive to the store, maybe I feel a little stiffness. Stop right there. The VA does not rate based on your average day. The VA rates based on your worst functional impairment. They rate based on the frequency and severity of your absolute worst symptoms. If you describe an average day, the examiner logs a mild impairment. If you describe your worst day, they log the severe impairment that matches the highest possible rating criteria. You must understand this fundamental difference. When they ask about a typical bad day, you are not lying by describing the worst-case scenario. You are accurately reflecting the range of your disability, which is what the rating schedule demands. Think about it this way. If your back pain is 1 out of 10 on a good day and 8 out of 10 on a bad day, and those bad days happen 3 times a week, the 8 out of 10 is the medically relevant data point for compensation. You must paint the picture of that 8 out of 10 day with excruciating functional detail. So, how do you answer this effectively? Start immediately by establishing the frequency and intensity of the worst episodes. Do not hedge. Do not minimize. Use definitive language. For a physical claim like knees or back, describe the limitations of motion during that flare-up. On a bad day, which happens at least 3 or 4 times a week, I wake up and the stiffness is immediate. It takes me 15 minutes just to get out of bed. I cannot bend over to tie my shoes. If I try to stand for more than 5 minutes, the pain radiates down my leg. It's a sharp shooting pain, not just a dull ache. I cannot lift anything heavier than a gallon of milk. I am essentially confined to the couch or a recliner for most of the day, relying on high doses of medication just to manage the searing discomfort. Notice the use of specific, measurable limitations. 15 minutes to get out of bed. Cannot tie. Shoes cannot stand for more than 5 minutes. Cannot lift a gallon of milk. These details translate directly into checkboxes on the examiner's form related to range of motion and functional limitation. If you just say, "My back hurts," the examiner has nothing to rate. Now let's pivot to mental health claims, where this concept of the bad day is even more critical. If you are claiming PTSD or anxiety, the bad day is your worst functional breakdown. It is not the day you felt a little stressed. It is the day you could not leave the house, the day you had a major panic attack, or the day you were completely unable to interact with your family or hold a job. The VA rating schedule for mental health is entirely based on occupational and social impairment. You must translate your symptoms into these functional terms. For example, on a bad day, which occurs several times a month, I experience a complete shutdown. I cannot answer the phone. I have overwhelming feelings of dread and paranoia that prevent me from leaving the bedroom. My wife has to call my employer and tell them I am unavailable. I experience intrusive thoughts and flashbacks so severe that I cannot distinguish between the memory and reality, leading to intense irritability and anger directed at anyone who tries to help. I am completely isolated. unable to perform basic hygiene, and feel overwhelming despair. This description addresses isolation, inability to work, occupational impairment, inability to maintain relationships, social impairment, and the severity of the symptoms, flashbacks, paranoia. This is the language of a high rating. Remember this rule. If you only describe the 30% impairment, you will only get the 30% rating. You must describe the 70% or 100% impairment if that is within the range of your chronic condition. This leads directly into the second, deeper question the examiner is probing. How does this condition impact your daily life, work, and relationships? This is the functional limitation question, and it is the true determinant of your rating. Percentage. The C&P exam is not a diagnostic tool. The diagnosis is already established. The exam is an assessment of severity. The examiner is mandated to report on your ability to work, your ability to socialize, and your ability to handle routine tasks, what the VA calls activities of daily living, or ADLS. If you simply state, "I feel sad," that provides zero functional information. You must connect the symptom to the consequence. Every symptom must have a corresponding limitation. Let's break down the three areas: work, relationships, and ADLS. When discussing work, you must be specific about how your condition makes you unreliable or incapable. If you are currently working, you must explain how you are managing despite the condition, often by using accommodations or taking frequent time off. Do not say, "I work fine." Say, "I constantly fear being fired because my panic attacks force me to hide in the bathroom for 45 minutes, or my back pain requires me to call out at least once a week. I cannot handle the stress of deadlines, and I struggle severely with authority figures due to my mental health challenges." If you are unemployed, clearly state that your condition is the direct reason. I have been fired from 3 jobs in the last 5 years because my concentration issues make simple tasks impossible, and my irritability leads to conflicts with supervisors and coworkers. I am unemployable in my former field. The key word here is unemployable, chaos, due to the disability. Next, relationships. This is often overlooked, but it is crucial, especially for mental health claims, as social impairment is a major rating factor. How has this disability strained your connection with your spouse, children, or friends? Be honest and direct. I have isolated myself completely. I used to enjoy going to baseball games, but now crowds trigger intense anxiety, so I stay home. I have difficulty communicating with my spouse because I am constantly irritable or emotionally numb. I have lost contact with most of my former military buddies because I cannot tolerate social gatherings. My children are afraid of my outbursts. This demonstrates severe social impairment. The examiner needs to hear that the disability has fundamentally altered your ability to connect with others. Do not hide this pain. It is evidence. Finally, ADLS. These are the mundane essential tasks: dressing, bathing, cooking, managing finances, driving. Detail the struggle. If your hands shake due to medication or nerve damage, you cannot safely cook. If your depression is severe, you may go days without bathing or changing clothes. If your pain prevents you from driving for more than 20 minutes, that is a functional limitation. I rely on my spouse to manage our bills because my concentration is shot. I often skip meals because standing in the kitchen is too painful. I have difficulty even remembering to take my medication on time. Every single functional limitation must be tied back to the service-connected condition. Remember, the examiner is a neutral party. They only document what you tell them. If you don't paint the picture of functional collapse, they cannot report it. Now we move to the foundational pillar of any claim: service connection. This is the third critical question, often phrased as, when and how did this condition first manifest while you were on active duty? This is the nexus question. The VA requires a link, a nexus between your current disability and your military service. If you cannot clearly articulate the in-service event, injury, or exposure that caused or aggravated your condition, your claim will fail, regardless of how severe your current symptoms are. The examiner is not asking for a generalized memory. They are asking for a specific, identifiable stressor or incident. You must be ready to provide a timeline, even if the exact date is hazy. If it was an injury, state the unit, the location, and the activity. I injured my knee during a field exercise in 2005 while deployed to Iraq. We were carrying heavy gear, and I twisted it badly, climbing over a wall. I reported it to the medic, but documentation was spotty because we were in a high-tempo environment. If you lack documentation, you must supplement this answer with a powerful lay statement or buddy statement detailing the incident. Do not just say, "It happened in the military." That is insufficient. You need the who, what, when, and where. For mental health claims, the stressor must be clearly defined. If you are claiming PTSD, you must identify the traumatic event. This could be combat exposure, a serious accident, witnessing a death, or experiencing military sexual trauma, MST. You must be prepared to briefly describe the event, focusing on the immediate impact and the lasting memory. The stressor occurred on date while I was serving in location. We were hit by an IED, and I spent hours providing aid to my injured comrades. The images and sounds of that day are still vivid, and that is when the nightmares and hypervigilance began. You do not need to relive the trauma in graphic detail for the examiner, but you must clearly establish that the trauma meets the criteria. For a stressor, if the stressor is service-specific, like MST or fear of hostile military or terrorist activity, the VA has a lower burden of proof, but you still must articulate the event clearly. Be precise, be detailed. The examiner needs to write down a specific stressor they can verify. But what if the condition didn't manifest until years after service? This is common for degenerative conditions or delayed onset mental health issues. In this case, your answer must focus on the inciting event and the continuity. While the severe symptoms of my back condition didn't fully develop until 2015, the initial injury occurred in 2001 when I fell off a truck during training. I was treated by the base clinic, and the records show complaints of lower back pain, which was diagnosed as a strain at the time. The current disability is the progressive result of that initial service-connected injury. This links the current severe disability back to the mild in-service incident, establishing the nexus. Never forget, the nexus is the bridge between your past service and your present pain. If the bridge is weak, the claim fails. This emphasis on timeline and documentation brings us to the fourth critical question, often delivered with a skeptical tone. Have you sought continuous treatment since leaving the service? This is the continuity of care question. The VA is looking for proof that your condition is chronic, not temporary. If you left the military in 2005 with a knee injury, and the VA sees no medical records related to that knee until 2023, they will be extremely hesitant to grant service connection or a high rating. The gap in treatment suggests that the condition either resolved itself or was not severe enough to warrant medical intervention for nearly 2 decades. You must be ready to explain any gaps in treatment honestly and logically. Do not panic if you have gaps. Most veterans do, but you must have a credible explanation ready. Common and acceptable reasons include financial hardship, preventing access to civilian care, lack of insurance, self-medicating or trying to tough it out because of military culture, or geographic isolation from suitable medical specialists. For mental health claims, a strong explanation is often the stigma associated with seeking help, fear of losing security clearances, or the belief that the symptoms were just normal stress until they became debilitating. Here is how you frame the answer. After discharge, I struggled to afford civilian health care, so I tried to manage the pain with over-the-counter medication for several years. I did seek treatment at specific clinic name in 2010, but they only offered symptomatic relief. When the pain became truly debilitating in 2018, I finally enrolled in the VA system and have been receiving continuous care from Dr. Smith since then. This answer acknowledges the gap but provides a rationale and establishes the point where the condition became medically unavoidable. Crucially, if you have treatment gaps, this is where lay evidence becomes your best friend. A lay statement is your testimony about the severity and continuity of your pain, even without a doctor's note. You must be prepared to summarize the content of your lay statements. While I don't have medical records for the period between 2008 and 2015, my wife's lay statement confirms that during that time, my back pain was chronic, and I was frequently unable to participate in family activities due to flare-ups. My buddy's statement from my former coworker confirms I missed work frequently due to the pain. This bridges the gap using credible testimony from people who witnessed your pain. The VA is obligated to consider this lay evidence, especially if it is detailed and consistent. Never underestimate the power of showing that your condition has been a chronic, persistent problem since your service ended. Consistency is key to chronic disability ratings. We now move to the fifth question, which is often the most lucrative for veterans, but the one they are least prepared for. Are there any other conditions you believe are related to this primary issue? This addresses secondary service connections and aggravation. Many disabilities are not isolated incidents. They create a ripple effect throughout the body and mind. The VA must compensate you for the entire chain of disability that originated in service. If you only claim the primary condition, you are leaving money and necessary care on the table. You must be ready to articulate the secondary conditions and the logical medical connection. For example, severe knee instability, primary, often causes an altered gait, leading to chronic hip and back pain, secondary. You must explain this biomechanical link clearly. Because of the chronic pain and instability in my left knee, I have been forced to shift my weight and posture for the last 5 years. This constant compensation has caused severe chronic pain in my right hip and lower back. I now require treatment for the secondary hip and back issues, which are directly caused by the service-connected knee disability. This is a powerful logical argument for secondary connection. For mental health, the secondary claims are equally important. For example, PTSD, primary, often leads to severe insomnia, resulting in chronic fatigue and irritability. The medications used to treat PTSD often cause debilitating gastrointestinal issues, IBS/GERD, or erectile dysfunction. You must list these connections. The chronic anxiety and hypervigilance associated with my PTSD have led to severe, persistent insomnia, which is now a separate, diagnosable condition. Furthermore, the daily stress I experience has caused chronic, debilitating migraines and severe IBS, which my civilian doctor has confirmed is stress-induced. These are all a direct consequence of the service-connected mental health disorder. By linking these conditions, you increase your overall combined rating significantly. A 50% rating for PTSD combined with a 30% rating for IBS and a 10% rating for migraines results in a much higher overall percentage than just the 50% alone. Prepare a mental map of your secondary conditions before the exam. Know exactly how A led to B and B led to C. The concept of aggravation is also critical here. If you had a pre-existing condition, like mild flat feet or mild hypertension, that was significantly worsened beyond its natural progression by your military service due to continuous heavy ruck marches, stress, or exposure, you can claim service. Connection for the aggravation. You must state that your service made the condition worse than it otherwise would have been. I had mild hypertension prior to service, but the extreme prolonged stress of my deployment caused my blood pressure to spike dramatically. Since leaving the service, despite treatment, my hypertension is now severe, requiring multiple medications, far exceeding what would be expected for my age. My service aggravated this condition beyond its baseline severity. Be ready to define the baseline and the current severity. This question is your opportunity to claim every single physical and mental consequence of your time in uniform. Do not leave any pain uncompensated. Finally, we arrive at the sixth, most challenging and most psychologically demanding question. It is rarely asked directly, but the answer to it shapes the examiner's entire report. What is the worst thing you are worried about happening because of this condition? This question forces you to state the true, unvarnished severity of your condition, focusing on the future and your deepest fears, without resorting to exaggeration. The examiner is testing the honesty and depth of your claimed functional limitations. They are looking past the symptoms to the underlying fear of total functional collapse. Veterans often struggle with this because they are trained to be stoic and minimize weakness. You must temporarily abandon that stoicism for this exam. You must articulate the catastrophic consequences of your disability. This is how you demonstrate that your condition is not merely an inconvenience, but a life-altering threat. If your claim is physical, the fear relates to total loss of mobility or reliance on others. My biggest fear is that my back pain will continue to degenerate to the point where I will be completely wheelchair-bound and unable to care for myself. I worry constantly about being a burden on my children or my spouse. I am afraid of losing my independence and having to rely on expensive, long-term care. This answer demonstrates the severity of the pain and the genuine fear of future functional limitations, which justifies a higher rating now. If your claim is mental health related, the fear must focus on occupational and relational ruin, or the ultimate loss of self. You must address the darkest aspects of your struggle using careful, compliant language. My deepest worry is that my condition will lead to a complete inability to maintain any long-term employment, leaving my family financially devastated. I worry that the constant irritability and emotional detachment will eventually destroy my marriage. Most profoundly, I am terrified of the severe depression leading to a total loss of hope, a point where I feel I can no longer continue. The fear of that darkness is always present. This statement, delivered with sincerity, conveys the severity of the mental health challenge. It speaks directly to the criteria for 70% and 100% ratings, which focus heavily on the risk of self-harm, institutionalization, and continuous inability to function in society. This final question is about authenticity. The examiner can spot performance or exaggeration instantly. If you exaggerate, you lose credibility, and they may discount your entire testimony. If you are stoic and minimize your pain, they will rate you low. The sweet spot is radical honesty about the functional consequences and the legitimate fears those consequences create. Do not perform the disability. Describe the terrifying reality of living with it. To summarize these 6 critical points: first, always describe your FOBAP, worst functional day. PANE, translating pain into limitations. Second, connect every symptom to its functional impact on your work, relationships, and daily life. Third, clearly establish the HOBAP nexus by identifying the specific in-service incident. Fourth, explain the continuity of care, and use lay statements to bridge any gaps. Fifth, identify and link all secondary conditions and aggravations. And finally, articulate your deepest fears about the future to convey the true severity of your disability. The C&P exam is not a casual conversation. It is a highly structured interview designed to extract specific data points needed to assign a rating. By preparing detailed, functional answers to these 6 questions, you stop leaving your compensation to chance. You take control of the narrative, you speak the VA's language, and you ensure that the record accurately reflects the full extent of the sacrifice you made. Go in prepared, speak your truth, and get the benefits you earned.